All right, but welcome, Paulos. It's a joy to be here with you at SATS. We are Bible-based, Christ-centered, and Spirit-led, and we always want to engage with contextual issues, affording us that privilege to say, how can we, from a biblical position, from a Christ-centered position, and being led by the Spirit, how do we engage with these things? And today, you and I are talking about the Agenda 2063, which is a beautiful document, which is a beautiful dream that our African brothers and sisters have put it together. And I was thinking about it, and I thought, in 2063, how old will I be? Yeah. And then I started asking myself, if I'll be that old, the people who are dreaming of it now, will they be alive? So maybe that's me trying to get you to think that I have internalized it, I've made it personal, and I wonder, from your perspective, what's your feeling about Agenda 2063? What kind of emotions does it bring to you?
Okay, thank you for the invitation. I think it's a good vision.
Right.
It brings excitement and motivation.
Right.
And it gives an opportunity for Africa to prosper. So it is a wonderful vision that needs actions in order to realize it. So yes, it's a nice one.
And I think based on what we wanted to do is, it somehow brings this come let's all dream type of invitation. And I think as far as that is concerned, what would you say to the church in response to the dream aspect of the Agenda 2063?
Okay, yes. When it comes to the dream, I think it is a matter of that the church must be involved in this dream, because remember, the church is on mission. It was sent by God. The triune God sends the church on earth. So whatever the church does must be something that is within the will of God. And then Paul puts it clear that the church is the feet and the hands and the mouth of Jesus. So the church should do whatever that Jesus would do if he was here on earth physically. And Jesus said, I've come that you might have life and have it abundantly. So the church should ensure that people are living a prosperous life. They have a life that they live on earth. Jesus went about doing good things. He heals the sick, he fed the hungry. And then that's what the church should do. Jesus cared for the widows. He defended children. And so the church should do likewise, because that's what Jesus would do.
I like your language, and I like how you make this a church thing. But when you look at the Agenda 2063 and how it's framed, the language is different. It's not a church language. They're talking Pan-Africanism. You look at the language there, we're talking about African Renaissance. And these are the words and the phrases that we don't often use in the church. And I wonder, given that we are trying to have this conversation so that the church can be involved, and as you said, you want the church to dream and be the feet, and to be practical about ensuring that the plight of women, the plight of children, the plight of the continent is taken care of. How do we then engage with African Renaissance? How do we engage with Pan-Africanism in the light of these ideas in the church?
Yes, we should just follow on, try to unite Africa, because that's what Pan-Africanism is about.
Okay.
But we should also be conscious that we don't fall back, say, to apartheid, because normally we see apartheid as white Europeans against blacks. But then we should be careful when it comes to Pan-Africanism, that we don't fall into that traps where we end up only valuing us ourselves as Africans. Then because the AU, for example, it might become a black supremacy instead of being an organization that implement superior actions to empower people of this continent.
You're touching on another issue there, and that has to do with the management of these things, with issues of accountability. And I think here in South Africa, we are struggling a lot with that. And in church, we'll speak of righteousness, right? In the government circles, we talk about accountability to say, with all these dreams, if we put them in action, if there is funds, if there's all that in action, how do we ensure that the church plays a supportive role, as you said, in making sure that the government is kept accountable? Do we even have that place? Do we even have that space to make sure that these things are done, and what we call righteousness, what we want to talk about accountability, is at least advocated?
Yeah. No, I think, yes, the church has a role to play there, because when you study Daniel chapter 4, 25 going down maybe to 27, we can see that God is in control.
Okay.
He is the one who rules over governments, and he sets all the head of states and the presidents. So all presidents are accountable to God, whether they agree with this fact or not, but that's what the Bible teaches. So the government should do whatever that will be in the will of God.
Okay.
So the government should protect the lives of people. It should deal with crime. It should administer punishment or rehabilitation of offenders. It must promote justice.
Okay.
So it must do all those things, and it should be accountable to God. And there is this reverend from Nigeria. He puts it nicely.
Yeah.
The three functions on which the church is related to the government.
Yeah.
He says it's priestly function, pastoral, and prophetic.
Right.
Yes. So with priestly is that the church should pray for government, and it should pray for healing of the nation. When it comes to pastoral, the church must teach the government, it must lead, it must direct, it must guide. But also the church should encourage the citizens to be good people who obey the authorities and people who pay their taxes.
Okay.
So that's how the government should relate. I mean, the church should relate with the government, keeping the government accountable.
I'm going to press a few buttons here. One of the biggest criticism, and obviously this is not we didn't even discuss this with you before, but one of the biggest criticism against Agenda 2063 is who's funding it. And upon discovery that the foreign governments somehow are the one funding some of the projects, and you know better, whoever pays the bills plays the music. And so how do we have hope that any of the things that are envisioned in the agenda will ever come true when we are not even paying the bill to implement them?
Yeah, so are you saying that like the foreigners, are you referring to those outside Africa?
The European Union and the others are helping out. I mean, for the education sector, I could give you an example. The European government has invested heavily, especially your German government. They have heavily in making sure that we achieve the education goals. But the question is, as good as it is, how well, if we can't even take money from ourselves to implement the dreams that we as Africans are thinking about. So, it questions the issues of commitment. And so I'm just wondering, from your perspective, do you think the church should maybe put money into this to make sure it happens, or we're going to watch it from a government's perspective? So I'm simply asking the issue of commitment in terms of the finances into implementing this goal.
Yeah, there should always be that separation between the church and the government.
Okay.
So the church must leave all politics to the church. The economics, it must not interfere unless in a time where there's distress and the church has to come in if the government is failing. Okay. But there should always be that division and separation. Okay. And it takes us back to that idea of Pan-Africanism. The extreme of it will make us think that we are isolated, but we must remember that Africa is part of the global. So somewhere, somehow, we will need other continents to help us, because we are all human beings at the end of the day. But then, yes, the vision is correct that Africa must come to a point where now it is able to cater itself. But this also, it might not take only Africa because God might use even other continents.
Okay.
So we must avoid to fall into a trap where we end up thinking that it's only about Africa. It is part of the globe.
And I think maybe to supplement the earlier question and maybe taking you to another question, the issues of safety and peace. Look, Africa has never been at peace for centuries now. I mean, we may live in relative peace here, that there's no guns, but up across the road in Mozambique, there is unsettling environments there. Up north in Africa, you have Congo that is consistently, the guns are still firing. And I'm wondering if we then say the church and the government must be separated, and we must leave certain things aside. Do you think even in issues of peace and security, the church should still just, allow the government to handle that, or is there a role for us to play?
Okay. The church definitely has a role.
Okay.
But obviously we must make sure that, everyone play their role. We don't take over the government as the church. We can't come like as if then we are more spiritual, then we can solve other things. The people in government have the skills. That is why the community has to make sure that they vote for people who are with integrity, who can execute everything. But then you listen to Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, the former chairperson of the African Union Commission. She says all of us, every one of us has a role to play in building the Africa we want.
Okay.
So everyone, including the church has a role to play, and that role is a role of a pioneer, not just to be a spectator. So the church should always be there to assist in all these things.
One last question, and this one is just from my own reflection, by the way, and that is, I'm wondering if we consider how democracy has been implemented in Africa as opposed to the rest of the world, because you said to us, we need to understand that we are a global village, we're not just ourselves. How good has democracy been, if you have any thoughts about that? I know this is outside box, but it bothers me personally that somehow we are vowing and committing Africa into democracy. And I wonder how peace, security, and democracy work together, because somehow democracy speaks of, government by people, meaning the people have power. But the only power they have, as you said, is voting. But how do we really know? Because we don't vote in South Africa, we don't vote for a person, we vote for a party. How do we have control as to the right people are in control? So I'm simply asking, do we have a conversation there of, should we consider a different African leadership, or should we change democracy so that peace and security can be achieved?
Yeah, I think, the church is involved in government, not as a church per se, but the people who are in government, they are people who were raised by God. So the church has always been involved in promoting Africa, bringing democracy. All over Africa, the people who brought change that benefited the citizens of Africa, most of them were inspired by Christian faith. You look at South Africa, there's Dr. John Dube, Albert Luthuli, Sefako Makhato. All those people and others, they were motivated by Christian faith. So even though it is not the church that is influencing the decisions of the government, but the people who are in there, God is raising them. So the people who are in there, they are bringing influence and they are being motivated by Christian faith. So the church has a role that is just bigger than speaking the gospel of Jesus, calling people back to life from sin. But it is also to meet the physical needs and to be part of the government. Just a few months ago, during COVID-19, President Ramaphosa recognized that church leaders are essential line workers. So even in the government, we are having people that are being motivated by Christian faith just to be there. So the truth of the matter is that the church in one way or the other, has always been involved in the government to bring difference. Although the church itself is a separate entity, but there are individuals in there who brings the change, and they are motivated by the Christian faith.
Beautiful. Well, I think that was just my own reflection that I thought I should ask you. But I think as we end this discussion, I want to thank you really for your time this afternoon, for bringing yourself and coming over to discuss this. But I wonder, is there anything else, as you close up, that maybe it's in your heart that I didn't get to ask you, that you thought, hey, this I need to say and share with the world? So over to you, and then we'll close there.
Okay. I think that it is important to understand that Jesus came to give us life. So we as the church should always strive to protect the life. It is all about life. So even with human beings, whenever they work, they bring productivity, there's technology, there's profits. Everything that comes to benefit Africa, if it comes at the cost of taking human life, then it must be rejected. So all in all is that human life is sacred. Man is created in the image of God. So yes, we should work and we should be productive, because God placed man in the Garden of Eden to work in Genesis chapter 2 verse 15, before the fall, before sin came in. So work is a blessing. Paul says the one who does not work must not eat. So yes, we should continue to work and uplift Africa. But at the same time, we must prioritize human life. Even the lives of unborn children, the life of children, the life of women, disabled people, it should come first. And that's how Africa will prosper and it will be blessed.
Indeed, indeed. Otherwise, if there's no human beings, there will be no Africa.
Yes.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much. This was beautiful to hear you and hear your heart. I think the Africa we want is not in some of us, it's in all of us.
Yes.
Indeed. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.